Right, yeah, I'm here. There we go. Right, I haven't given anybody any warning about this because I didn't know I was going to do it. Now I'm just going to try and zoom in. Can I zoom in on this? Yes, I can. Okay. So today on my YouTube going live, oh God, it keeps giving me pop-ups. That's no use. I'm going to be painting some Little Bluestem grass. Welcome to live chat. I don't want that little box there. I just want to be able to zoom in. Ah, there we are. Now I'm zooming in. Okay. And zooming out again. Okay, so hopefully I can get that in focus. Can I? Oh, I hope it's better focus than that. Otherwise, there'd be no point in you lot watching at all. Right. So, as I say, this is the first time I've done a live. I don't really know what I'm doing. So, hopefully, you'll be patient with me. So, this is the Little Bluestem grass, which I'm painting for a client. And the first thing I'm going to do is mix up the right colours. Good morning, Susan Palmer. You see, some of you know what you're doing. You know how to access these things. I don't even know how to do them. It's all on a wing and a prayer. So the special thing about this grass is that it's very, very blue. So instead of just being like a bright green, there's an awful lot of blue in that. So the colours I'm going to use are, let you see, I've got them all written out, just so grown up. Oxide of chromium and cobalt blue. Sort of... I also, and I shouldn't really, but I also mix in a little bit of white gouache to give a kind of solidity when I'm doing these very bluish greens. That's too green. I am still using my trusty Winsor & Newton Series 7 paintbrush, but I'm getting somewhere looking for a synthetic. So that's something. Okay, right, that's the right blue, more or less, bit more white. Come on, Harper. Yeah. So I'm hoping that this will sort of be in focus and stuff. I don't know if it will be going live. I guess maybe it's patchy, so maybe doing Botanical Illustration live is not great. Anyway, you guys can tell me whether or not it's clear what I'm doing. So I'm going to start by outlining each of these stems of grass. I've got to get a what do you call it, a sharp nib on the grass, on the paintbrush first. So the paper I'm using today is total mind blank. It's a hot press watercolour paper, and it's Stonehenge Aqua. That's right. For a long time I was only using Fluid 100, but then something weird happened to one of my pads of Fluid 100. The sizing went odd or something, and it blurred, and it just made me really nervous. So I've gone back to Stonehenge Aqua. So at each of these grasses, I literally just outline them to start with. That's the first thing to do. And I always put a midrib in as well. It's not even that you can definitely see the midrib in most of these grasses species. It's just nice to have a little bit more detail and definition going on. Now, I had a lot of struggle drawing this up, so it's for a client who is writing a paper about, I think it's a scientific paper, but I think it's about the prairie lands of America. So there's, I think, 5 grasses that she's looking at. I know one of the other ones is Agrostis scabra, which is the rough bent grass, and that was fine. I know what bent grasses look like. I love them. They're very elegant things. But this one, Little Bluestem, I mean, living in the UK, we don't have grasses that look much like this. So for me, this was quite difficult, kind of drawing it from lots and lots of reference. So I always collect reference when I'm doing an illustration, but gathering lots of reference together and trying to get the feel of the plant right. And she kept saying, and she knows, because she knows these plants growing, she knows how they look and how they feel. Oh, she'd say, it's not quite right. It doesn't quite feel like a bluestem. And then eventually we pinpointed what the problem was, and the problem was to do with the ratio of the flowering heads, which are very kind of tall and scraggy, in comparison to the leaves. So I'd been doing the flowering heads much too big, and once we shrunk them down, then the whole thing felt better to her. So I'll take her word for it. She seems quite happy with it now. She says, that's the little blue stem I know and love. So hopefully I'll be able to do her proud with the illustration as well, and it'll be something she recognises and is pleased with. I love working for scientists, scientific papers. It sort of feels, oh, it feels very grown up. It feels like I'm being taken seriously. So I do have a biology degree, although I never got any further than just doing an undergraduate degree. But I like it when I'm asked and expected to know stuff, and I like when I have to learn stuff as well. I find it invigorating to always be learning. So each new species I illustrate is a new adventure in learning what is going on. So this one's quite interesting. So it's the blue colour, and it's a sort of scraggy growth, and the seed heads are quite feathery. And in fact, so I always, when I do a grass, I always do details as well. And the details in this case, I've put onto another, I put them onto another sheet of paper, one of the early ones I did that didn't work out so well. So I will do all those later. Here we go. For now, we're just doing this, delineating each individual leaf. Down at the bottom, you've got the sort of the scabrous, the sheath, the basal sheath, and they're always kind of yellowish and papery. So I'll leave those for now. For now, just everything that's going to be this blue colour, I'm going to outline. See, when I don't go live, these are the bits where I say, oh, I'll pause the video and I'll come back to you later. But you see, going live, maybe I don't need to pause the video. Maybe you pause things, just sit with it. You don't have to see me making endless colouring in lines. I often make a joke about what I do. People say, oh, what is it that you do for a living? I'm like, yeah, I do really posh colouring in. That's what I do for a living. Okay. So these are going okay. It's quite difficult to figure out where each individual one goes. And before you start drawing a line, you need to know where you're going to end up. I can't begin and then be like, oh, I don't know where this line's going, because there needs to be a confidence to each and every line. The consistency of the paint is kind of like cream. So I've been told by people who know about these things that I use, oh gosh, that was too much pressure. I've been told that I use my paint very dry. So I wouldn't call it a dry brush technique, mainly because I don't actually know what a dry brush technique is. But people in the know have suggested that it's much drier than your traditional botanical illustrators might use. But then I know I've also learned over the years I don't work very much like the traditional botanical illustrators at all. They do this amazing thing that I'm totally incapable of doing, where they start with their lightest lights, their pales, and then they go from pale to dark, building up washes, which to me is, it's like some witchcraft. It's like, how can you hold all that information in your head and transmit it through your brush with each and every layer? Whereas what I do is I'll get some of my mid-tones down straight away so that I actually know where I am, and it's like you have a map of the subject. So for me, that makes life much, much easier. But I do always have to, when I do videos and things, I do have to give the caveat that the way I work is considered really unusual. I also think my paint box is considered unusual as well, in that I've got a lot of colours on. It's not even that I use them all, I just quite like pretty paint boxes. So I have loads and loads of paints on the go all at one time. And I do use them all, but I haven't, I'm not very good at keeping colour guides or anything like that. You learn your paint box, so you learn what paints mix together. Ooh, stop breathing when you do a tip. Nicely. But for the first time in my life, I was very grown up, and I did this, which I've never done before, which is I did an actual kind of chart. And that's because there's a outside chance, we don't really know what's happening with it yet, and there's an outside chance that at some point I might be, there's a publisher and I are kind of doing little circles, dances around each other. There's a chance I might be commissioned to do a book on botanical illustration for beginners. at some point. And I thought, well, if I'm going to do that, I better make darn sure that anybody who I'm teaching, that I actually tell them the right colours, rather than just saying, oh, take a blue. It doesn't really matter what blue. And if you're a beginner, the last thing you want is somebody who's vague, right? So I thought I ought to grow up a little bit. So I've done that. Go. Anyway, if anything comes of that, I'll keep you posted. I think the rough idea went to the book fair, and I'm just waiting on feedback from the publisher. I'm not, as of yet, I'm not terribly hung up either way on whether or not it happens. It would be nice, but it's not the end of the world if it doesn't. There's so much work on right now, which is a massive surprise to me. Although somebody did say, I don't know if I know that. Oh gosh, can you see how rough that is? That's because I drew this up before and then rubbed it out. And often if you rub things out too violently, you damage the sizing on the paper, which means it goes bobbly. So you just need to be confident as you go over those areas and hold your hand a bit steady, and maybe slow down the stroke a little bit, and then you'll bypass the worst of the bobbles, the bobblings. I was going to say, yeah, I was a little bit worried when, I mean, I don't know if everybody's in recession right now. And in Britain, we're not legally, we're not officially in recession. But when the economic conditions got rougher, I thought the last thing anybody's going to want is natural history illustrations of grasses and wildflowers and things. But work just hasn't dried up. If anything, there's more than ever. And one of my friends who works in the sector, she's an ecologist, quite scathing. She said, oh, of course there's plenty of money. She said all the money for things like nature boards and interpretation, she says all of that comes from the lottery, which in Britain is true. We have a national lottery, and a lot of the money raised by that will go into historical and nature conservation stuff. She said in times of need and in times of desperation, more people than ever before play the lottery. She said, so in fact, your earnings your earnings are based on the misery and desperation of the poor. So that made me feel great. But anyway, I think sometimes you need friends like that to deliver a few home truths. Eh? Okay, so this comes around like this. Now I've got to be careful that I don't do every single one of these grass blades. What's happening here? That's a rubbish bit of drawing. I don't want to make all of them blue, because some of the lower ones, like this one that's bending forwards, you see that one? That one's going to be kind of yellowish. So one of the things about this particular plant, from the reference I've gathered, seems to be that they are quite kind of scruffy. So a lot of the blades of grass that die. Oh, crikey, that was rubbish. Ah! Don't panic, don't panic. A lot of the blades of grass that die on you, on the plant, they just sort of hang around, and they just sort of form sort of beige tussocks and stuff. So again, that can be useful in terms of telling what a species is. So yeah, so I have to make sure that I reflect that in this illustration. So my illustrations this week, I did the other grass for this this lady's scientific paper, the Agrostis, which is nice. And I have also this week done, which I put some progress shots of up on Instagram, something called a sandhill screw moss, which is very difficult to do. And that had to be painted wet and dry, because it looks totally different. When it's wet, it looks like beautiful little bright green stars against a kind of rusty orange background. And when it dries up, all of the little moss shoots and stuff, they curl up and flatten themselves against the central stem of the plant. So it just looks like kind of twists of, well, I don't know what it looks like. It looks almost like nothing on earth. It looks dreadful. Now I feel mean, because you develop a loyalty to the plants you draw. But yeah, it doesn't look beautiful. So I had to paint it in both states, and that was very exacting, but really nice. I love painting mosses. And then yesterday I did a club rush, and that's easy enough. But the thing with club rushes is they've got really long straight stems, as do all the rushes. So there is absolutely no scope for making a mistake. If you do a wobbly line, then you are going to pay for it for the entire duration. So you can't make mistakes with that. So that's quite stressful. So I would never, I don't know if anybody's noticed, but when I make films, I only ever make films of things that I feel confident that I'm going to be able to illustrate live. Not live, you know, that I'll be able to illustrate on camera. Anything that is difficult for me to do or challenging, you will notice you will not find a film of it, because I'm having to concentrate that a little bit harder on getting the illustration done. So I often think with what I do, very little mystery to it. There's nothing particularly exotic or exciting about it. I mean, the hard bit, right, this is drawing. Make sure you get that right. Not quite sure what's happening here. It goes down like that. Yeah, you've got to make sure you get your drawing right. That's quite hard. But when it comes to the colouring in like this, it really is just a matter of having the patience to do it. And I've got on this channel, on the YouTube channel, I've got a lot of people who are so sweet and so gracious and say the kindest things. And often they'll say, oh, they'll say things like, oh, you're very talented, which is an incredibly sweet thing to say. But I do always think to myself, and I quite often say in the comments and things, it's not to do with talent. I think it's to do with practice. It's like if you just do something over and over again, and you get better at it. And also if you just put the time in. So I mean, anybody who has got the right brush and a steady enough hand and the time, the luxury of having the time to spend all day painting grass, probably going to come up with something not 100 miles away from what I come up with. I really don't think there's anything particularly special about my, my illustrations. I think I'm just in a luxurious position of being able to do them because it's my job. So it's springtime here in Britain. Now you probably can't hear through the film, but there's a lot of blackbird and sparrow action in my garden. All the male blackbirds are all strutting around looking like they own the place, and the female blackbirds are looking a bit tired. I think they're probably all nesting by now. The sparrows are bickering. I love it. And the garden is my garden's a bit of a state. So I'm not a good gardener. Anything that I actually try and plant tends to die. But what I do is when if I've been sent a specimen, or if I've picked a wild flower to draw, instead of just throwing it out, I very much like to try and give it a chance to go on living somewhere. So my garden is full of really random wild flowers that you wouldn't normally find all in one place. So something else I illustrated recently, something called the Cannock Chase berry. It's an incredibly rare little thing. It's a hybrid between the blueberry, which is different from the American blueberry, but the English blueberry and the cowberry, and is only found, I think, on one site in the whole of Britain, which is a kind of heathland area near where I grew up, actually, called Cannock Chase. And it's like a perfect cross between these other species. So I was sent some samples of that to illustrate. So I illustrated it, did that bit. And then I had these samples, so I planted them out. But I knew it's heathland, so I planted them out in what was once my children's sand pit. So whether or not, and in fact, the moss I was talking about, that's sandhill screw moss. So again, that's used to sandy substrates. So that has been planted out alongside the Cannock Chase berry in the old sand pit. Let's see if it survives or not. I doubt it will. But one thing that has done well in the garden is the wild forget-me-nots, which are everywhere, and also cowslip, and I love cowslips. So that's nice. Primula veris, I think. So these sideways ones are the ones that are going to be kind of brownish. So this one I'm going to send it blue. So what I'm terribly impressed by when people go live, right, is they'll go live and they'll be doing what they're doing, like me, painting or whatever, and at the same time they'll be monitoring their comments. So they'll be checking. I mean, if I'm doing this, and that's a sort of stop, which I don't really want to do, I can't really check to see if anybody said anything or anything. And then you see, if you're an audience member and you're not getting any interaction, you're probably going to end up thinking, well, what's the point of this? This is no different from seeing her wittering on in a normal film. So I will take a pause in a second and have a look. Maybe they have teams of minions. Maybe that's what happens for most people in the real world. I haven't got any minions. My children would never minion to me. I'd be so lucky. And my other half is certainly not made of minion shaped cloth. Okay, this one comes down here. So these leaves are in-rolled, I think, which is why a lot of them are very thin. So when they're in-rolled, it means they've sort of curved up, so they'd look like a little snail shell in cross-section. And that makes them really tough. So if an animal wanted to graze on them, it's going to make it that much less appealing, I guess, to have a sort of scabrous, sort of non sort of chewy, delicious piece of grass. And I'm guessing, again, my knowledge of the American Midwest is very, very patchy, but I'm guessing that historically you would, if you were one of these grass species, you would be very keen not to be deliciously edible. I'm guessing, I mean, what would there have been? There would have been bison, there would have been buffalo, wouldn't there? American buffalo, historically. I don't know what's there now. I am filming, yeah. Am I interrupting? You are interrupting, but it's all right. I'm going live, so. No, it's all right. You know what? Go on.
No, I've got lots to talk about.
Okay. There, that's the non-minion shaped husband. He's clearly very frightened. That's brilliant. Oh dear. Yeah, so if you make yourself thin and spiky, then nobody's going to want to eat you, I suppose. I should have asked the person who I'm doing the illustrations for exactly what she's exactly what her research is about the 5 species. I know there's 5 species of grasses, and I think I've illustrated 4 of them for her. Some I had on file already. Because that's something that I do. When I illustrate something, I always make sure to hang on to my copyright. If any of you are illustrators and are watching this, please follow suit. Because if you hold on to your copyright, if you specifically say, you know, copyright remains mine, then you can reuse the illustration later, which means you can charge for it. So let's say I paint this grass now. I have to concentrate on where that stem of grass goes. Let's say I paint this grass now, and then in 2 years' time somebody says to me, oh, do you have the little bluestem? Do you have a picture of a little bluestem? I can say, yes, that's right here, you know, £40 to reuse it in your book on the ecology of the prairies or something. Oh, they say, and that's fine. And you literally get money for doing nothing. And when botanical illustration is your career, you will soon find out that the rates of pay, although, you know, everybody I work for is lovely, but the rates of pay they're low, right? That's just the way the industry is, unless you're in advertising, and there isn't a lot of call for what I do in advertising. So in order to make it work as a career and to support the family on it, I absolutely need to hang on to those copyrights to make sure that I have enough money coming in to feed the family, etc., etc. So yeah, if you're an illustrator and you're doing it commercially, please hang on to your copyright. You will thank me for it. This is all a bit confusing. I'm not quite sure what I've drawn here. So these are the ones I was talking about, the sort of mucky, turgidy ones. See, I can't see that anybody's made any comments, so that's good. Although some people have given me a thumbs up. That's very gracious of you. Thank you, people. Okay. And hopefully what I'm filming actually is on screen and also going live. I haven't sworn yet, which is great and also slightly unusual. You just wait though. If I spill something all over it, then we'll be in trouble. So yeah, here we go. Yeah, and when my other half asked whether whether I was pausing the film, the answer to that is I don't actually know how to pause the film. Maybe. Oh, you've got a nice voice, Lizzie. Look, you see, comments do come up. There you go. Thanks, guys. Or maybe they come up and go away again. Who knows? Okay. And I'll tell my family I've got a nice voice. They don't say that. They say very rude things. Right, so this one comes down like this. So we're getting there with these leaves. These are just plotting them all in. Okay. And coming up here. So there are some lateral leaves on this species coming off the flowering stem. Again, that's another way of telling grass species apart. Some have little leaflets, little leaves, blades coming off their main flowering stem. Some never ever do. And often you can tell the species by what those leaves look like. Yeah, often they look very different from the basal leaf. I don't know what that shape is. That's weird. That's a weird bit of negative space. So these are all the ones that are all mucky. That one's not. That one's pointing upwards. Now what I'm doing is fatal, which is I'm painting over a bit that I've just painted, which means in all likelihood my right hand is resting proudly on wet paint, which is quite likely to smudge. Hopefully not. I hate smudged paint. It's a nightmare. Okay, so then we've got these ones coming up here. And I haven't changed the colour at all at any point yet. I literally, it's that initial, what was it? Cerulean plus cobalt green and a little bit of white gouache. That really is all I've used so far. Oh, that's messy. Messy. There we go. And there's another, somebody asked me if they could reuse some of my illustrations, and it was a yes. Recently, as a student, a veterinary student, and they were looking at using plants to minimise or to help treat things like stomach upsets and ulcers in horses, I think it was. I love what people do with their lives. The fact that there's somebody out there who has spent the last 3 years, I think she was a PhD student, studying these different plants and what effect they have on the digestive systems of ruminants. The more strange and specific the things that people do are, the more intrigued I am by them. Also, this morning I was very pleased because I, first time ever, submitted some, this is also blue, there's the stem, I submitted some biological records to iRecord, which is a kind of citizen science project. I'm going to double check so I've got loads and loads of reference on this, and before I just go for it, I want to check these little side leaves, make sure that they are the same colour as the main stem. A bit hard to tell, really. That's what I was saying about them being rolled up. Do you remember when I said the leaves were in-rolled? Like that. They've got a sharp keel on them as well. Well, that's not going to help me. It shows how messy they are, though, remember? And that was my original pencil rough. This is my research, my written research. Other people's drawings. We've come full circle without me having found any answers to that. Luckily, I have some more sheets of reference. I think, by the look of it, they're more or less the same colour. Maybe they're a little bit greener. I'll do them a little bit greener, but that's... Yeah, this isn't quite right. This doesn't make sense to me. I think I've messed up. I think this needs to be continued, doesn't it? In order to clarify what's going on. That can do that. Okay, that could be one of those. And this can come out here. Yeah, okay, I can see what's happening. So often when you're doing illustrations, you have to redraw quite often as you go along with a paintbrush, just to make sense of what you're doing. There we are. Does that make more sense? I think so. Yeah. Okay, so now I'm going to add a tiny bit of... I'm not going to get rid of this main colour because I'm going to be using it again. But I'm going to green up a tiny bit. So can you see it's very similar colour still, but it is yellower. I'm going to apply that to these little leaves going up the flowering stem. Sure is pretty quite different from North. But this is North American though, Caraway. Colour, the joy of colour, hey? You just discovered me last week, Sheila. I'm so sorry, you poor, poor thing. What a horrible thing to discover. Okay. So it's a little bit greener. There we go. Nice. Those of you who are making comments, which is very sweet of you, what I will definitely do, I'm assuming when I'm done with this, that the comment will remain underneath. And if they do, then I will obviously... What the heck's going on there? I will obviously take the time to answer properly. But as I say, while I'm actually painting, I can't see what you guys are saying, although I do appreciate your input. I need somebody to sit there and say, oh, somebody said this, somebody said that. What's your reply? Let me type in a reply. Yeah, we all need an assistant, don't we, in life? Am I still on the screen? Yes, I am still on the screen. Okay. There's a car alarm going off up the street, which I don't know if you can hear. It's so rural and peaceful. I know what my other half came in asking about. It's my daughter's birthday party this weekend, and he will have been asking questions about sourcing pizza or bowling alleys, possibly, or which car we're going to take, etc., etc. All these incredibly uninteresting minutiae of the life of busy people with kids. There we go. He's creative as well, my other half. He makes bikes out of wood. Beautiful bikes, gravel bikes. They're called Tumpa cycles, TWMPA. That's right. And that's named after a local mountain, which is also known in English as Lord Hereford's Knob, which always makes me giggle. But yeah, Tumpa bikes made out of ash. So there you are. Two creatives, two horrible children, and a lovely house in Hay-on-Wye. Okay, we're nearly there with these. So once I'm done with these, I will give them the chance to dry a little bit. Is that everything? Oh, look, that tip got left behind. None left behind. Isn't that the Marines? That's the Marines, I think. Ah, this is a mess. What the heck have I done down here? Okay. Oh, okay. I see what I've done down here. It's okay. It's okay. It's not a disaster after all. That's going to be one of these. Yeah, that's going to be one of these cross leaves. I said the ones that are a bit scrappy. In fact, I think I'm going to put the scrappy ones in now. So I've realised I've already wasted half an hour of your time. So I think probably what I plan to do with this, I'm not quite sure how to do it best. I wonder if you can edit live things when you're done. What I'd like to do is just stick with you guys for about an hour and then let you get back, and then I always work a bit faster. Oh, sorry, I wasn't showing you mixing colour. So this is Naples yellow plus I think this is sepia, which is based, I believe on the ink of the cuttlefish. I work briefly and very, very happily voluntarily every Thursday after school. I went to high school in America, and I lived in Washington DC, and I would, after school every Thursday, I would make my way to the National Zoo, to the Invertebrate House, which is an amazing place. I have a horrid feeling it's shut, actually. One of my friends said that she thinks it might be shut. But I'd go there after school and you know, and just volunteer, do work. So I'd feed the octopus and feed the cuttlefish and talk to the public about brittle stars and ocean ecosystems and look at the mantis shrimps. And oh, I loved it, absolutely loved it. Really inspiring thing to do. And the fact that they let me, some random scraggy sulky 16-year-old, go and do that was amazing. I mean, credit to them, right? I mean, I didn't look like a budding biologist. I looked like a goth. Yeah, bracelets all up my arms and a face like I'd been hit. Face like I'd been hit in the mouth with a kipper half the time. Very sulky, because of course when you're 16, nobody understands you, etc. Right, this comes down here. But yeah, the cuttlefish was so sweet, and they had they recognised, I mean, incredible cephalopods are incredibly intelligent animals. And I mean, I know they're mollusks, so they're related to things like your oyster and your mussel. But can't really see what I'm doing. There we go. But they would recognise different people, and those that fed them, they had a special marking because their skin is full of things called chromatophores, which are colour cells, and the little cuttlefish would light up in different colours, and they'd do different things with their tentacles depending on, you know, if they saw you pass in front of their cage and things. It's very sweet. Sepia officinalis, that was what they were. I love them very much. And the giant octopus, of course. Pacific giant octopus, that was an amazing creature. She was always intent on escape. She spent her whole life trying to get out of her cage. She was so clever. So one of the things we did with her was you'd put a blue crab in a jar, like literally like an empty jam jar that you might have. Gosh, flatlining now on my American words. Jelly. There you go. What you might have jam or jelly in, and she'd be able to see the prey item in there and unscrew the lid of the jar and get it. I mean, how cool is that, right? For an animal that hasn't even got a backbone. And my mum used to be very funny on a Thursday. Oh, she'd say, "Oh, you'll be home late for supper, will you? Have you going off to see your spineless friends?" She thought it was very funny. She and Dad would laugh at that, and I'd be like, "Oh my God, you just don't understand me." Yeah. Okay, so this again, I'm just using these to outline these leaves. It's the same mix of sepia and Naples yellow, and I'll add a bit of variety to the colour when I get that colour on. And normally when I'm working, listen to the radio. So there's a very nice music station in the UK called Radio 6, BBC Radio 6, which you can get. That's green. Okay, which you can get on digital radio and on online. So normally spend my time listening to this alternative music and stuff, but you end up, when you work like I do entirely alone in a studio all the time, you end up under the misapprehension that, that all the DJs are your friends. So that's what I normally do. Don't always talk to myself non-stop. Okay. So you can see it's all coming together, it's all just outlined. It would be good if I could pause this, because I mean this bit's pretty boring actually. You want to see it when the colour washes go on. I know you do, and I don't blame you. I do too. Step by step. Patience, ladies and gentlemen, patience. Okay. Right, nearly there. Look, we've only got these two to do now. And in fact, it's the lion's share of the work is doing this, is the outlining. And I mean, my technique is the same whatever I'm doing, right? So I'll start by literally drawing in this kind of, as I say, kind of semi-dry paint, drawing in the detail. And then it's just a matter of layering in the top washes to add the colour and then picking out your darkest darks. So it's all very similar, my techniques and my approach, but certainly I think the longest winded bit is I've just added a bit of yellow ochre into our mix and it's made it much too yellow, so I'm knocking it back with a touch of sepia. What was I saying? Yeah, it takes the longest bit. The drawing up in paint takes by far the longest, I think. Especially if you're doing like complicated leaves, because in order to get the texture of the leaves, you need to be working into where their veins are casting shadows and all that kind of stuff. That malarkey. And that can take ages to do. Whee! There we go. Okay. Yes? Yes. Yes? Hi Lizzie, I'm icy. Then your comments oh crikey. Oh dear, I didn't want to do that. There we go. I can pause this for a second. I'm just interested to know what I can and can't do. Yeah. Right. I can see there are comments coming in, but now what's really annoying is I look up and there's a comment and then it disappears into the ether. It's very upsetting. Okay, so now what I'm doing is I'm taking this blue, this cerulean blue and cobalt green, making it really watery, smortery, very dilute. Let's see. And literally just whop it over, trying to stay within the lines. I mean, this is the bit where I really am just doing colouring in for a living, right? But can you see I'm only doing it on one, well, more or less, doing it on one side of each grass blade. Well, she says demonstrating with a grass blade, which actually I've only given one thinness, but so that you'll be able to see here, hopefully. Whoops. No, only on this side, yeah. And once it's dry, you'll see why. Then we can go and do a second layer, and it will make this side look slightly darker, which gives a little extra depth. And also because these this blue stem does have keeled leaves, it's not entirely fatuous for me to be doing this, because they do have keels. Keeled leaves means that it's like if you were to look at it, if you were to cut the leaf across its width and then look at it, it looks like the profile of a boat. So it's sort of, yeah, it's keeled. Okay. Now here, it's important to try and leave space as you go along between the different things, because if you just cover everything all at once and don't let individual elements dry, then what can happen is you lose a lot of definition, because it all smears into one nasty mess, which is always disappointing. Hate it when that happens. So I'm kind of picking and choosing. You can see they're all going to have the same colour, but I'm picking and choosing which bits to start with and then letting it dry. When it comes to letting it dry, I do have because my studio's a bit cold, I have a little fan heater, which I normally just put on a little bit in the morning to take the edge off it. But if I have really wet paint that won't dry, you can always just fire the fan heater up and play that over the top until it does dry. Or the other thing that I do more often is move on to a different piece of work or a different corner of the thing that I'm painting. And that way you don't lose any time. So this is going on really wet. And I like it really, I like to keep it wet because when it dries, it crisps up on the edges. And that can look really pretty. Does anyone know what reference Lizzie is using for her drawing? Yes, I know what reference I'm using for my drawing. I do. So this is all stuff I found on Google Images. So I'll go on Google Images to start with. But I also go, there's something called, it's Q Online or something, KEW, like Kew Gardens. They have a lot of information on lots of different species. If you put in the Latin name, it'll bring up loads of images. But I collate all of these images. So to put together an illustration, you'll have, like, this is useful in terms of the colour. Where are we? Yeah, in terms of the colour and the tussociness. This is useful in terms of the flowering heads. These old illustrations are very useful in terms of the spikelets and what the awns are doing. Again, other information. I think there's the University of Missouri has a very good invasive, no, it's the wildflowers of Missouri, or is it Minnesota? Anyway, if anybody wants to know, I have a whole list of botany sites that I go and visit to get my reference from. This was a very important reference, and this is the reference that, in fact, my client sent me and said, this is what I want it to be looking like. I was like, okay, got it. So these are all the different references that I'm working from. So I gather them on the computer and then I put them all together. I also do my what do you call it? My written reference, so I know what I'm talking about. Yeah, so that's one of the originals. That's a photocopy of one of the original ones I did where the flowering head was much too big. And this one, which I do still have on another sheet of paper, is the details, the ligule and the spikelet and so on. But when you say what reference, it's not one bit of reference, it's loads and loads of reference. And there's several reasons for that. Partly because if you use loads and loads of reference, then if there's any weird mistake or colour tweak or something that's gone wrong, then you won't be perpetuating it because you'll be able to see that that's an abnormality. Partly also, you can't just find a photo and copy it. You just can't do that because that's copyright infringement. So you're not allowed to infringe anybody's copyright. So that means that if you're working from somebody's photo, illustration, whatever, what you do has to be more than 70% different from that image, which sometimes if you're just like painting a blade of grass, it's kind of difficult because a blade of grass looks a whole lot like a blade of grass. I've got a cup of tea here on the go as well, it's a bit colder. So yeah, you do have to be careful about reference, but mostly, especially if it's, so sometimes I'll be asked to paint something really unusual. That's normally with the animals, actually. With the plants, it's quite easy to put it all together. But with the animals, sometimes you'll be asked to paint something unusual and you'll find an amazing image that some incredibly talented wildlife photographer has taken. And you think, that is exactly what I want. And so what you can do then is you can always approach people, right? So humans are infinitely generous, I've found. And if you go and ask people, you know, I'm an illustrator and I'm looking for a picture of, I don't know, what, flick flack spider maybe. You've taken this amazing photo, would you mind if I used it as reference? Often they'll say, no, that's absolutely fine. And that's just a lifesaver, because then you are allowed to more or less trace an image if you want, if you have the permission of the photographer. You can do that if that works for you. I have somebody who takes amazing photos of British birds called Pete Walkden. And he very generously says I can use the photos whenever I want. So I'm extremely grateful to him. And every now and then I will send him one of the originals just to try and keep him sweet as a kind of thank you. Okay, this is all right. It still doesn't look like much yet, does it? Again, do you see? I just saw a little comment came up, but now it's gone away again. She had several photos. I don't know where she acquired them from, though. So Q, like I say, KEW online, and there's another one which is Botanical Illustrations. If I'm allowed and if I'm able to do write-up underneath this, I will give you guys some suggestions of where you can look for images to work from, because especially if you live in a place where the plant isn't growing that you're drawing, you can't do it. So there are lots and lots of different websites. I'll do that when I'm done. What I'd like to do, oh crikey, what I'd like to do is not smash my head into the camera. What I'd like to do is pause this and then come back sort of for the end bits, but yeah. I've also realised I don't know how to stop it. So when I get to the point when I've had enough and you've all clearly had enough and there's nobody there, I don't know how to stop it. I guess I just hit the phone until it stops. Right, this is still dry. And again, we're doing the same for these. But I'm adding a little bit of blue into this, so that there's a bit of variety in the colour. There we are. Okay. It's getting there. Right, do you know what? What I'm going to do now is, I've just realised how boring this is. Not that you guys have said it's boring, you're much too kind. But I am going to stop this now and then see if I can add an illustration of the finished thing when I'm done and dusted. So I'm not sure how to do this. If I press cross, that should probably do. Or not. Right, now you get to see the joy of me trying to understand how to stop this whole process. Are you sure you want to stop streaming? Yeah, I do. It's been fun, but you've had an hour of it now.